Social Security can withhold up to $22,080 from you in 1 year. Not a fee, not a tax. Benefits you were technically owed, held back before the check ever reaches your account. It happens to early claimants who keep working, and most of them never see it coming. The stakes are sharper than they look. A worker who doesn't understand the rule behind that number does one of two things. Some panic, convinced the government quietly stole a year of retirement. Others do the opposite. They claim early while still on the payroll and unknowingly hand back thousands, month after month, without ever running the math. The real question isn't whether $22,080 can vanish from your benefits. It can. The question is where that money actually goes once it's withheld, and whether claim it today is the smart move or the trap. Because that figure isn't random. It's the exact output of one rule most claimants never read. Start with the number, and the panic starts to fall apart. Start with the number itself, because a figure that precise is never an accident. $22,080 doesn't fall out of a policy speech or a headline writer's imagination. It's a product, the output of a formula with specific inputs, and once you see those inputs, the panic starts to drain out of it. Here's the mechanism. Social Security runs something called the Retirement Earnings Test. It applies to people who claim benefits before their full retirement age and keep earning a paycheck. For 2024, the annual earnings limit is $22,320. Earn below that while claiming early, and nothing happens. Cross it, and the rule engages. For every $2 you earn above the limit, Social Security withholds $1 in benefits. That single ratio, $1 held for every $2 over the line, is the entire engine. Everything else is arithmetic. So where does $22,080 come from? Work the mechanism backward. To have that much withheld in a year, your benefits have to be large enough that the $1 for minus $2 rule can chew through them. Picture a composite early claimant, a machinist who filed at 62 and draws roughly $1,840 a month, about $22,080 a year. Now suppose he earns enough above the $22,320 limit that the withholding wipes out his entire annual benefit. The most the test can take is everything he was scheduled to receive that year. And that ceiling, his full annual benefit, is where a figure near $22,080 surfaces. Notice what that means. The $22,080 in the headline isn't a penalty stacked on top of your benefit. It's a slice of the benefit itself, the maximum portion the earnings test can hold back before the check ever clears. The number counts benefits withheld, not dollars destroyed. That distinction is the whole story, and almost every secret benefit headline steps right over it. This is where the forensic reading matters. A headline says up to $22,080 withheld, and lets you fill in the emotion: stolen, lost, gone. But the mechanism describes something narrower and colder. A claimant who filed early, earned above a published threshold, and triggered a rule that pauses part or all of a benefit that person elected to start too soon. And here is the part the headline almost never prints. Withheld is not the same as forfeited. Social Security does not pocket that $22,080 and walk away. When the early claimant reaches full retirement age, the agency performs a recomputation. It counts the months in which benefits were fully or partly withheld and adjusts the monthly benefit upward to account for them, as if, for those months, the person had never claimed at all. Read that again, because it inverts the whole frame. The months you didn't get paid are treated, later, almost as if you delayed claiming for those months. The benefit is recalculated to give much of that withheld money back, over the rest of your life, in the form of a permanently higher check. Not a refund in a lump sum, a deferral, quietly built into the machinery. So the true shape of $22,080 is this, a number that measures the ceiling of what a working early claimant can have temporarily paused, a pause that the system is designed, by rule, to partly repay. Not a theft, not a bonus, a timing mechanism dressed up as a loss. Which raises the obvious next question. If this figure is the output of one specific rule, who does that rule actually reach? Not everyone claiming Social Security, not everyone still working. The earnings test has a doorway, and the $22,080 only exists for people who walk through it. Because this figure only exists if you cross one specific line, and millions never do. Here's the objection that gets shouted at the screen the moment the earnings test comes up. So the government claws back my benefits just because I dared to keep working? That's a punishment for staying productive. It sounds airtight. A person earns a paycheck, the check they were promised shrinks. That reads like a fine on effort. Give that objection its strongest form, because it deserves one. The earnings test does single out work. It ignores every other kind of income you can name. A retiree pulling $80,000 a year from a pension loses nothing. A landlord collecting $60,000 in rents loses nothing. Someone living off dividends, capital gains, an IRA, an annuity, a spouse's income, the test never touches any of it. Only wages from a job and net self-employment earnings count. So yes, on its face, the rule reaches for the one group still clocking in and leaves the passive income class untouched. If you wanted to design something that looked like a penalty on labor, you'd design this. Now the rebuttal, and it turns the whole thing over. The earnings test isn't triggered by working. It's triggered by claiming early while working. Those are two different doors, and only one of them opens the trap. Walk the scenarios side by side. Take two workers, both 63, both earning $50,000 on the payroll, nearly $28,000 above the 2024 limit. The first has claimed Social Security. The test engages, and the $1 for minus $2 rule starts withholding roughly $14,000 of his benefit that year. The second worker, same salary, same age, has not claimed. She's waiting. For her, the earnings test does not exist. She can earn $50,000, $150,000, any figure at all, and Social Security withholds nothing, because there's no benefit in payment to withhold. The wage isn't the trigger, the open claim is. Now change one variable. Move both workers past their full retirement age, 67, for anyone born in 1960 or later. At that point, the earnings test switches off entirely, permanently. The first worker, the one who claimed at 63 and watched benefits get held back for years, now earns the same $50,000 with nothing withheld at all. Same salary, same job, same person. The only thing that changed is the calendar. The rule was never about the work. It was about the gap between claiming early and reaching full retirement age. So the objection had the mechanism backward. The test doesn't punish productivity. It reconciles a specific choice. Starting benefits before you were entitled to the full amount, while still earning a wage, the system treats as evidence you didn't yet need them. It's not a fine on labor, it's a governor on early claiming. That reframes who the $22,080 even applies to. Not every worker, not every retiree. Only the person standing in one narrow overlap, below full retirement age, drawing a check, and earning above the annual limit from a job or a business. Miss any one of those three conditions, and the number is pure fiction for you. The pension retiree never qualifies. The high earner who hasn't filed never qualifies. The worker one day past full retirement age never qualifies again. Which is why the headline is doing something slippery when it waves $22,080 at everyone. That ceiling belongs to a specific claimant in a specific window, and most people reading the headline aren't in it. But for the ones who are the early claimants still on the payroll, that word from the last segment starts to matter enormously: withheld. It's a quiet word, and it's carrying far more weight than a headline ever lets on. For the early claimant standing in that narrow window, the word withheld arrives sounding like a verdict. The check that should have landed doesn't. Months go by. The benefit statement shows a payment reduced to zero, or trimmed by hundreds. And the natural reading, the one the headline counts on, is that the money is simply gone. Surrendered. The price you pay for the crime of filing early and refusing to stop working. That reading has weight, because the loss feels immediate, and the recovery, if any, is invisible. You can see the withheld dollars, you cannot see what happens to them. So the mind fills the gap with the worst answer: forfeited. Here is where the record contradicts the instinct. The Social Security Administration's own actuarial studies have examined exactly this question: what becomes of benefits withheld under the earnings test? And the finding is consistent enough that the agency states it plainly in its program materials. Withheld benefits are not kept. They are credited back through a recomputation performed when the claimant reaches full retirement age. The mechanism is specific and worth reading slowly. When you reach full retirement age, Social Security counts the number of months in which your benefits were withheld, in whole or in part, because of the earnings test. It then adjusts your benefit as if you had claimed that many months later than you actually did. If you filed at 62 and the test withheld a full 12 months of benefits across several years, the agency recomputes your benefit as though you'd filed roughly a year later, restoring the early claiming reduction that those withheld months would otherwise have locked in. Read what that does to the $22,080. The system's own analysis is blunt. On average, workers subject to the earnings test get most of their withheld benefits back over the remainder of their lives through a permanently higher monthly check, not a lump sum refund, not a bonus, a recalculation that raises the payment for as long as the person lives. So the honest translation of withheld is not taken. It is rescheduled. The earnings test doesn't confiscate the $22,080. It moves it out of a working year when the claimant arguably didn't need it, and into every retirement year afterward, spread across a benefit that no longer carries the full early claiming penalty for those months. Consider the composite machinist from earlier. He filed at 62, earned well above the limit, and watched a full year's worth of benefits vanish before he turned 66. On the panic reading, he lost roughly $22,080. On the actual mechanism, he lost almost nothing permanently. At full retirement age, his benefit is recomputed upward, as if those withheld months of early claiming never happened, and the higher check follows him for the rest of his life. Live a normal lifespan, and the study's finding holds. He recovers most of it, and then some. This is why the entire emotional architecture of the headline is built on a missing sentence. Up to $22,080 withheld is true. And most of it comes back through a lifetime benefit adjustment is also true, and it never gets printed, because it deflates the alarm the headline was manufactured to create. None of this makes the earnings test costless. There's a real difference between money now and money spread across decades. A worker who needs cash at 63 is not consoled by a fatter check at 80. Liquidity has value. The timing genuinely matters. But that is a very different problem from theft, and it demands a very different response. You don't panic over a deferral. You do the arithmetic on whether the deferral works for you. The loop from the last segment finally has its answer. Once it's withheld, the money is not forfeited. It is deferred, mechanically, by rule, and returned through a recomputation the agency performs without being asked. Which means the headline's real error isn't the number, it's the word today. One number in this whole story bends the wrong way, and it's the one almost nobody quotes. The $22,320 annual limit gets cited endlessly. But there's a second limit, and in the single year a claimant reaches full retirement age, it changes the math so sharply that the panic figure barely survives contact with it. Set the two side by side. Below full retirement age for the entire year, the claimant lives under the low bar $22,320 in 2024, and the harsh $1 for minus $2 rule. Earn $1 over, lose 50 cents of benefit, that's the regime that produces the alarming ceiling. But the moment you're in the calendar year you actually reach full retirement age, Social Security swaps in a different set of numbers entirely. For 2024, that special year carries a limit of $59,520, nearly 3 times higher, and the withholding softens. Instead of $1 held for every $2 over, it's $1 held for every $3 over. More room before the test engages, and a gentler bite once it does. The higher limit only counts earnings in the months before your birthday month. After you hit full retirement age, the test switches off completely, and every remaining dollar you earn is invisible to it. Here is the central truth that emerges from those two number sets. The $22,320 headline describes the worst corner of the earnings test. A full year spent below full retirement age, under the low limit, under the steep ratio, with a benefit large enough to be entirely consumed. It is the ceiling, not the norm. The closer a claimant stands to full retirement age, the less the test can reach, until the year it reaches almost nothing, and then nothing at all. Watch it unfold through the composite machinist one last time. At 62, deep under the low limit, earning well over it, the $1 for minus $2 rule could withhold his entire annual benefit. Move him to the year he turned 67. Now he's under the $59,520 bar and the $1 for minus $3 rule, and only his earnings before his birthday month count. The same $50,000 salary that erased his check at 63 barely dents it in his FRA year. Cross the birthday, and the withholding stops mid-year for good. The number didn't shrink because he earned less. It shrank because the rule governing him changed with the calendar. So the earnings test isn't one wall, it's a ramp. Steepest at 62, easing every year, and flattening to zero the month you reach full retirement age. The $22,320 sits at the very top of that ramp, describing a claimant in the harshest possible position. And even for that claimant, the last segment already settled where the money goes. Because this is the part that closes the account. Everything withheld under either limit, the low one or the high one, the $1 for minus $2 or the $1 for minus $3, feeds the same recomputation at full retirement age. Steep year withholding and gentle year withholding are treated identically, counted as months of delayed claiming, restored through a permanently higher benefit. Whether the test took the full $22,320 at 62 or a few $100s in the FRA year, none of it is forfeited. All of it is deferred and largely returned, which strips the question down to its bones. The money comes back either way. The rule that produces the scary number is temporary and self-repairing. So the only decision left isn't how to recover withheld benefits. It's whether to trigger the test at all. If the money comes back either way, then the entire $22,080 drama collapses into a much smaller, much colder question. And it's not the one the headline was arguing about. The headline fought over recovery. That fight is over. The real decision was never whether to reclaim withheld benefits. It's whether to start those benefits at all while you're still on the payroll. Sit with what the earnings test is actually telling you. When it withholds a check because you're earning above the limit, the system is, in effect, saying you elected to start early, but your wages suggest you didn't yet need to. And then it undoes the early start for those months through the recomputation. Read that honestly, and a strange conclusion surfaces. For a worker earning well above the limit, claiming early and then having benefits withheld produces almost the same lifetime outcome as never having claimed early in the first place. The test quietly drags the aggressive filer back toward the patient one, which means the question stops being, how do I get my $22,080 back, and becomes, why did I file early at all? Take the composite machinist one final time, but now hand him the choice before he makes it. At 62, still earning $50,000, he's weighing whether to file. If he claims, the earnings test erases most of his check for years, then recomputes him upward at full retirement age. If he simply waits, files later, or lets delayed retirement credits build past full retirement age, he arrives at a similar or larger permanent benefit, without the paperwork, without the withheld months, without the illusion of a check that isn't really arriving. For a high earner still working, Claim It today doesn't unlock money. It manufactures a benefit. The test then holds back and calls the holding a loss. Now apply it to the viewer, because the machinist is a stand-in, not an answer. The math tilts one direction only under specific conditions. If your earnings sit well above the limit and you're years short of full retirement age, filing early while working is close to self-defeating. You trigger a withholding you'll mostly get back anyway, gaining little, but the anxiety of watching checks vanish. But flip the inputs, and the answer flips. A worker earning just under or barely over the limit sees little or no withholding, and an early claim delivers real, spendable income now. Someone in poor health or without other assets to bridge a gap may rationally want the cash early, even knowing the test will bite, because money at 63 can matter more than a larger check at 80 that never arrives. That's the honest frame the headline erased. The $22,080 was never the decision. It was a symptom of a decision already made. The decision to file early while earning a wage, the system treats as a signal you could have waited. Fix that upstream choice, and the scary number never appears. Make the choice blindly, and the number is the least of your problems. So the earnings test isn't really a rule about withholding. It's a rule that forces one question into the open. Does starting benefits now, while you work, actually leave you better off? Or does it just generate paperwork around money the system was going to give you either way? For most working early claimants, the answer isn't hiding in the $22,080. It depends less on that ceiling than on one date printed on your benefit statement. That date on your benefit statement, your full retirement age, is the only variable that ever mattered. The $22,080 was a distraction dressed as a discovery. Trace the whole story back to its origin and the headline dissolves into something almost boring. A number that measures the worst corner of a temporary, self-repairing rule, waved at millions of people who will never stand in that corner. Hold the two readings side by side one last time, because the contrast is the entire lesson. The headline says, up to $22,080 can be withheld from you, and it lets your imagination supply the verb stolen, lost, gone. The mechanism says something colder and narrower. A specific claimant, below full retirement age, drawing a check, earning above a published limit from a job, triggers a rule that pauses part of a benefit that person chose to start early. The pause is measured, and the pause is largely undone. Now deepen it, because the money question, the one this whole video opened on, finally has a clean answer. When the earnings test withholds that $22,080, the money does not vanish into a government account. It is credited back through a recomputation at full retirement age, counted as months of delayed claiming, returned as a permanently higher check for the rest of your life. Not a refund. A deferral, built into the machinery, paid without you asking. The Social Security Administration's own analysis is blunt about it. Most workers subject to the test recover the bulk of what was withheld. So the macro loop closes exactly where the arithmetic pointed. Where does the money go? Into your future benefit. Is claim it today the smart move or the trap? For a worker earning well above the limit and years short of full retirement age, it is closer to a trap. You manufacture a benefit the test then holds back, gaining paperwork and anxiety instead of income. For a worker near the limit, or one who genuinely needs cash now, an early claim can be a legitimate, rational choice. That's the deflation the headline was built to prevent. Up to $22,080 withheld is true. And most of it comes back through a lifetime adjustment is also true, and it never gets printed, because it turns a robbery into a rescheduling. None of this makes the earnings test free. Money at 63 is not money at 80. Liquidity has value. Timing genuinely matters, and a worker who needs cash now is not consoled by a fatter check 2 decades out. But that is a decision to run on your own numbers, your earnings, your health, your other assets, your distance from full retirement age. Not a panic to inherit from a headline that counted on you never reading the rule underneath it. The honest verdict is small and steadying. The $22,080 is not a hidden bonus and not a theft. It is the mechanical output of the retirement earnings test, a ceiling that belongs to one narrow claimant in one narrow window, and for nearly everyone who triggers it, that money is deferred rather than destroyed. The scary number was never the question, the date on your statement was. Run the arithmetic before you file, not after the checks stop arriving. Because wealth is built to last, and the decisions that make it last are the quiet ones you make on purpose, with the actual rule in front of you, not the headline written to frighten you past it. This is education, not personalized advice.